Yeah.
Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you if you know why people behave about you the way they do. And what is it in you that causes people in patterns, in consistency, that people treat you and understand you in certain ways, and you them too. But what is it? What are the powers that be? And what we're going to do is look at that in the realm of the cards we're born to, and how we're playing them, and how other people play them, and judge us through their eyes. And to help us do that is a return of our card expert and my friend Alexander Dunlop. Alexander, welcome back to Energy Stew.
Thank you, Peter. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, I'm so happy to. And this is important because everybody's playing their cards whether they know them or not. And so the audience shouldn't worry about having to know what their cards are in terms of what we're going to talk about. This gives you insight into behavior itself from all of us, about all of us. According to our cards, whether we know them or not, because our brains aren't hooked into the knowledge of the cards, they're hooked into the vibes that the cards are a window to.
Yes.
And so you and I, let's just examine a whole bunch of cards, and some of them might pertain to people's lives who are listening, but irregardless, everybody's lives are affected by all of them anyway, because of all the people we bump into every day and in our lives, and how we judge them and they judge us from these vibes.
Yes.
That the cards describe. So
well,
yes.
That's exactly right, Peter. And this is something that I'm often saying to my clients, is that we're all giving off an energy vibration, whether we realize it or not. And what the cards do is give us a conceptual frame, a symbolic frame, to conceptually understand and appreciate what these energy vibrations are. But we're already giving them off all the time. And one of the ones that I find interesting and a little bit humorous is whenever I have a new client who's born to play a king card, any of the kings, any of the four kings, and it could be man or woman, it doesn't matter. And I'll ask them, did you used to get put into positions of authority and leadership when you were a child? And they always say yes. Like they were the class president, or they were the captain of the track team, or they were leading the debate team, whatever it is, they were the ones that were nominated for those authoritative leadership roles. And many of them didn't like it or didn't necessarily want it, but they just found that energetically, vibrationally, people gravitated toward behaving, to answer your question, behaving towards them as if they were leaders and kings or authorities. So it's very interesting. I've noticed that.
Yeah, and that can be either the birth card or the ruling card.
It can be more, in my examples, it's been more often their birth card, but absolutely their personality card, what you're calling the ruling card, it has the same vibrational effect, that people just experience you as an authoritative person. The downside of that is that then they start jostling with you for authority. They start arguing with you and fighting with you for who's king of the hill. You know, that happens a lot to people with a king energy. They'll say, oh, people are always like arguing and jostling and trying to challenge me. Yeah.
Challenging their authority as well.
Yeah.
But they can't help it. I mean, they're born to be in that position. Yep. And leadership is a slippery slope.
Well, that's right. But this is to answer your question, that people are always treating us according to these energy vibrations, for better and for worse.
Right. And queens?
Queens, You know, what happens for queens is they end up believing it's all up to them to take it all on themselves. So then their perception becomes that other people just aren't pulling their weight. and aren't doing enough, or aren't perfect enough, or aren't organized enough. And
Yeah.
so queens start to have this perception that other people are behaving toward them as if they're just looking for me to do it all. Like I'm supposed to be the one who handles everything. So they
Well,
often get bitter and resentful.
it's the same with tens.
Similar, yeah. Yeah.
Tens are the princess card.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's harder for a 10 than a queen, because a queen has that sense of being in a position of authority and of caring about others, because a queen is a nurturer. And so there's a lot of course, that goes into that, questions and authority, et cetera, that can be difficult. And people can challenge that. But queens usually are very talented people.
Very talented. But they can end up as loners as well, because they just get the impression that no one around them is really respecting them enough, or honoring them enough, or pulling their weight.
Or pulling their weight, right. I think queens are exceptional enough that they see that the people around them aren't really matching up.
No, that's right. Whereas that's the opportunity for the queen. And this is very interesting for all the cards, you know, that gap in perception, that's the opportunity to play our cards right. So for the queen, for example, that's their opportunity to nurture those people and support those people who don't quite get it as well as they do, who aren't quite as exceptional as they are.
But they do have that nurturing feeling.
They do. They do. And they want to develop that. They want to cultivate that. And then whenever I've spoken to someone coaching them who's playing a queen card, that's always something they're aware of. They might not like it though. They're like, oh, it's always up to me to nurture other people. Who's going to nurture me?
That's right. But the 10, the princess card, is, I think it's not as obvious to tens that they're playing that card. I think they're just feeling the pressure of it, because the princess, and we talked about this I remember in the last show, the princess has kind of like the keys to the treasure of the kingdom, because she's royalty and she's, you know, powerful. And so people expect a lot from the princess, and she doesn't always know that, you know, she's a 10, she doesn't realize she's the princess. She just feels the pressure.
Well, that's right. The 10, it's about learning how to receive. And as you say, the people with this 10 energy, they're the first ones in the royal court. You have the 1 through 9, and then you have the royal court, 10, 11, 12, 13. And she's the first one who gets into the royal court, and she may not feel like she belongs there, that she doesn't deserve it, quote unquote. So she may have trouble accepting all the accolades and praise and attention and rewards that come along with her position. So they end up overdoing it. They end up trying too hard, trying to prove that they're worthy and that they deserve it.
I love that. That's so true. And because of tens, I know that they always feel like they're playing catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet people don't give them any credit for any downside. They expect the upside from them.
Well, they do. But the thing is, you know, to your question of how do people automatically behave toward each other based on vibrations, people give to tens and want to give to tens in the same way that we might give to celebrities, like we pay attention to Kim Kardashian or other celebrity figures and give them our attention. Tens don't realize, to your point, how much people are automatically attending to them and honoring them, because the tens don't see it. They're blind to it. Like you said, they don't recognize it. They're always chasing. But what they need to realize, that I'm always telling them, is pay attention to the compliments you get. Pay attention to the praise that you get.
You know, every card that we have, all the cards are cards that we need to know about if we're born to them, because they all have these pressures, these strengths and weaknesses that we're living with, bumping around with, that we can be so much more in charge of our lives with if we know them better.
Absolutely. And then we don't take it personally either. That's the
Right,
big upshot.
right. We blame the card.
Yeah. Why am I having this recurring pattern? Oh, there must be something wrong with me. No, this is the pattern that you're playing out in this lifetime.
Yeah.
So,
well, Jacks have a tough time because they they are experimenters in life, and people don't always want that.
no. Well, and on the downside too, Jacks are argumentative. So, like the king, we talk about how people challenge the king's authority. Jacks can experience a lot of arguments, a lot of
Well,
contradictions.
yeah, because Jacks want to be free to explore, and they don't want people questioning them.
Right, because that seems like it's going to be accountability and responsibility.
Yes, and that's okay if they're comfortable with their exploration, but usually it's an open book or an open box that they're climbing through and trying to find their way, and of the kingdom. Let's call it the kingdom because they have access to the whole kingdom.
They do.
And that's why Jacks are explorers, because they have nothing else to do. They're just kings in waiting, and so they have the whole kingdom at their disposal. So they want to take advantage of it, and they don't want interference.
Well, that's right. I often feel like the Jacks are like the aristocracy, that everything is provided, and you could either become a spoiled brat or you could use your position of privilege to do something truly great in the world. And one of the things,
I'm a Jack, by the way.
Yeah.
And what you just said struck a note, because I had a number of my aunts growing up who thought I was a spoiled brat.
Yeah. Well, that's, to the point of this podcast we're doing, like, how do people behave toward us?
Right.
And so that's one of the things. People may look at Jacks and like, oh, they're spoiled brats, and then treat you accordingly, which is that questioning and interference that you were describing. The other thing that happens for Jacks is they act with a chip on their shoulder. Like, people aren't respecting me enough. People aren't appreciating me enough. People don't know I'm a Jack. Come on, I'm royalty. Don't you know I'm royalty? Why aren't you treating me with deference and respect?
I get that totally. That, but the whole idea is that we're the Jack in the box. In other words, we're not boxed. We're really, we really challenge the box all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why people think we're spoiled, because why don't we behave? Why don't we stay in the box the way we're supposed to?
Well, that's part of it, but Jacks really can be spoiled brats at the same time.
I don't think I was really. but anyway, so I love talking about this. It's and I think our audience will appreciate these insights about royalty, but certainly we have the rest of the deck of cards, and we can go down to, for instance, let's talk about the nines, because you're a nine.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to play the 9 of hearts. Nines, we are going to have experiences where, and this is only something I've realized relatively recently, where people betray us and hurt us, but not for any personal reasons. They don't even necessarily realize that they're doing it. It's part of the master plan, so to speak, and you mentioned this to me earlier today, that playing the 9, we are learning how to forgive and how to have compassion and how to move on, so that we don't take these things personally. So playing a 9 energy, we're going to continually have experiences of disruption, tragedy, betrayal, etc. And that's going to be how we experience the behavior of life. And we can, of course, let that get us down into a victim story, or take it as an opportunity to rise above.
Well, 9s try to climb to the top of the ladder, and get it all in, take it all in. They want the whole ladder. But then again, the ladder has its top. And then what you do after that, and that's where I think the biggest challenges come in, is that people say, you know, you can't own it all. and I'm going to attack you for it. And then you have to find a new ladder.
Well, a new rung on the ladder. I think the ladder keeps going.
Oh,
But I
good.
think,
I'm glad to see that. But they're all are, to me, they're only 9 rungs.
well, it can keep going in cycles of nines, but to your point,
Yes, yes,
we do have to let something go in order to keep climbing. That is very true.
yes.
Um,
And
and
that's the challenge. That's the shadow too, is that people will, you know, will upset the completion of this ladder, so that you have to start new rungs on it.
Well, yes, it's a letting go process, and that those whatever behaviors we experience of betrayal are tied to something in us that has an attachment. Otherwise, we wouldn't have even experienced that betrayal to begin with.
Yeah, that's important. It's really amazing, you know. So when people are nines or have family that's nines, they have to see a lot of disappointment, but along with a lot of fulfillment, because you fill up and this is great. Look, I'm getting it all. Look at me. I'm so happy. And then a loss comes along, a disappointment, a tragedy, something that upsets the apple cart. And you have to find, you know, the next, another first rung.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, eights often complain about how everybody is trying to overpower them or trying to push them around. They often have stories of like people trying to bully them or exercise their authority and wait on them, you know.
Yeah, that's the shadow of the 8, is that because 8s are infinitely powerful.
Yeah.
And very smart, very wise. And so it challenges people.
Yeah, it's similar to the king energy in that they experience people pushing against them a lot of pressure, and they feel a lot of pressure. Like it's all up to me to weave this whole thing together. And it's up to me. I got to hold it all together and weave it all together. And they have that experience like, oh, I got to control everything. And then they can get obsessive as well.
Well, yeah, it means a lot to me because the 8 of spades is my Pluto card, which is my shadow card. And the shadow card is where you get challenged the most, really. And so my 8 is heavily challenged by people. And yet because I'm also a Jack, I'm willing to explore what I can do next to overcome that.
Well, and you're pointing out something really important for your audience to know, is that we have a whole hand of cards. We have a birth card, a personality card, but we have a whole hand of cards, and are all different aspects that we're playing out, and they interact with each other. So there's a whole symphony of energy in play.
It's not only profound, but it's very understandable. When you know the symphony of each of your cards, you know how to play each instrument in the symphony.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And one can offset the other and help you with another one. Or of course, one could sabotage the other one. And
great. Well, that's how complex it is. And that's why, you know, your book, Play Your Cards Right, is so important, because it really looks at so much of this, and people can get a real feeling for each card and for even the whole hand that each card represents. So we can find out our particular cards either through the book or going to your website, thesourcecards.com.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you mentioning that, Peter, and we're very excited to share this knowledge. My wife and I started the Source Cards. It's full of information. It's basically a whole book that we're giving away for free on the website. You can look up all the information on your cards there.
Wow.
So,
yeah, that's wonderful. And because as we're talking about, these play such a strong role in our lives. And you and I, you know, we we know a lot of people who have different cards who are amazed at how much they've learned from knowing their cards.
Yeah. Well, so to your point of what you said earlier, it helps us to navigate these energies more gracefully. We're already experiencing these energies. We can't change that, but we can change how we interact with them, how we play with them, how we navigate them.
You don't have to believe in cards. You're playing them anyway.
Right.
Maybe you're not believing them is a trait of one of your cards.
It's true.
So we have a little bit of time left to talk about sevens.
Yeah, well, sevens are continually experiencing that people are not meeting up to their expectations and not coming short in some way. You know, there, and then sevens can be nitpicky and looking for flaws and finding flaws.
I think sevens, it's a magical number. I think sevens want the magic to live and experience when the magic is being challenged by the either people or even themselves who aren't living up to magic, to good magic.
Yes. I agree with that. Sevens are looking for the magic. And because of that, we could say they're high expectations. They're the ones most likely to be wounded and upset and hurt when their expectations aren't met. Even though the nines can fall down the ladder, I think that the sevens are actually the most unstable. And they flip-flop and they pivot a lot. So there's a lot of instability in the experience of the sevens and in their moods and their personality and their thinking, a lot of instability.
So people who are sevens should really learn more about being sevens and manage their lives as, let's say, optimistically as possible.
Well, what I'm often telling people playing the seven card is enjoy the roller coaster.
Wow.
Enjoy the ride. Don't fight against these currents that are up and down, these roller coaster energy. Don't fight against it. Just go with it.
You know what I'm laughing about is that my wife is a seven. It's her ruling card. And since I'm a jack, it's a roller coaster ride for her, living with the jack.
Well, she would have that roller coaster ride anyway, even if she blames you for it. She has that for herself.
Yeah, well, she'll attract interesting, entertaining things in her life.
Well, exactly.
But she does play her card up so much. She's one of these people who everybody admires because she has such a positive attitude.
Well, she does radiate a light.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think that's her seven, and it's very enjoyable. So we're only down to the last 3 or 4 minutes, and sixes are a difficult card.
Well, they can be. You've summed them up well in the past. They always think everyone else is irresponsible.
Yes, it's a highly responsible card, but it has to do with feeling that they're right about what they're doing and what everyone else should be doing. And doesn't mean they are, but they need to feel that way. They need to believe in their rightfulness.
Yeah, they need to believe in justice, and they may experience that there's a lot of injustice in the world. Things aren't fair.
Right.
And so that's how they may experience things and people treating them.
Hard to be a six because the world is unfair. And sixes are so based on what they feel is truth and justice. And nowadays it's hard to find that.
Well, and what happens for sixes is that they end up falling into the role of the referee and the umpire, and they often hate it. Like the six of hearts ends up becoming the family referee, or the six of diamonds. It's like it's up to them to steer the whole office, keep everybody sane and balanced, and everybody's looking to them to be the rudder that steers the ship. And they often find themselves in that role, and they don't necessarily like it. Although some who are very controlling do like it.
Yeah, but because it's so judgmental, there are a lot of people who are going to fall short to them.
Yeah.
And So for our audience, whether you're playing the six or not, somebody playing the six might be questioning you.
Right. They want you to toe the line.
Right. Oh, it's amazing how powerful that energy is in sixes, that there's such a need to be correct. It's a very Buddhist role, to live correctly or you don't get your nirvana.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say that's the positive side. Negatively, they can be militant.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I know some
Like
sixes.
you need to be a good soldier. You need to obey orders and you need to march correctly in line.
Right. So that there is justice in the world that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. We've covered quite a few cards. And the previous show, we covered some cards, but not in the order like we're doing
right
with this. And I love this order because we're not really looking at the suits as much as we're looking at the card number. And I think it's easier for people then to comprehend that and not worry about the suit so much, even though there's a lot of nuance between each suit.
Yeah. Well, and as you were saying earlier, it applies to whatever position in the life path the card may be. So even if your birth card is in a 6, then you probably will have a 6 somewhere in your life path. And
Who expects a lot from you.
Or in that dimension of your life, you will have that attitude and that aspect and that way of behaving.
Yes. Well, this is so wonderful to talk about this with you, because I think it'll help the audience a lot to know them, to understand their lives and their interactions with others so much better.
Thank you, Peter. It's a lot of fun to do this with you. I really enjoy it.
Thank you. Me too. And I hope to see you again soon. I know you're off on a long journey, but when you get back, we'll get back to more card talk. So thank you, Alexander.
My pleasure, Peter.
And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.fm. I can be reached prn.live. We've changed the URL. And I can be reached at peter@heartriver, HEART, river.org. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks so much for listening.